I could barely move, like even in the bed. If I were to cough slightly or laugh slightly, it felt like my insides were going to explode. It was very difficult. There was a decrease in the severity of my nerve pain. The thing about the injury is that once you sustain something this life altering, it's almost like a restart. You need to start from scratch. My name is Joseph Vincent Polizio. I'm 27 years old. I grew up in Staten Island, New York City. I sustained a L2 burst fracture to my lumbar spine. It is an incomplete injury. I still retain some motor and sensory function below the site of injury. So I came to Verita Neuro initially with the hopes of receiving the epidural stimulation. Procedure itself was 1 week, and they offered me the option to have additional weeks of therapy. So I chose to stay for 1 additional week of therapy to make sure everything was good. So a total of 2 weeks. December 21st, 2024, I was shredding the slopes in Austria and I hit a jump. And then when I landed on my back and my snowboard dug into the snow. So the forward momentum basically compressed my spine. And that was how I got injured, like as badly as I did. Immediately after the injury, I was basically bedridden, immobilized, mainly due towards the fact that I had just received the surgery and there was a lot of inflammation. I could barely move, like even in the bed. And it was very difficult. Even if I were to cough slightly or laugh slightly, it felt like my insides were going to explode. It was very difficult. And of course, I lost bowel and bladder function, the ability to walk, had very little movement, basically just in and out for a few days, for the first week, essentially, because of the combination of the pain medication and sleeping. Well, I was into snowboarding before the injury. It was a new hobby that I had picked up about a year prior to the injury. It was one of my favorite things. And to be honest, in the event that I did make a full recovery, if that were to be possible, I would definitely take up snowboarding again because it was one of the most exhilarating activities I've ever experienced. And I really think it's something that everyone should at least try, despite, the fact that this happened to me. Aside from snowboarding, I was very into poker, music, video games, and just basically seeing what's out there in terms of traveling and exploring. I was stationed in Italy when I was injured, and this allowed me a great opportunity and it was a great privilege to be able to travel to the local European countries with relative ease. I was very content with the lifestyle that I had living out there. I would say the biggest challenge is coming to terms with your mental ability, the difficulty socializing, reintegrating into a schedule. All these things stem from the mentality that you have about the injury. And this is like the starting point in which you kind of need to battle acceptance and like complacency with what happened and come to terms with it. This is probably the biggest challenge. And I really feel like anyone that has come to an answer for this is enlightened or they have seen something that I haven't because it's a constant battle and it's very difficult to like maintain that sense of will because there is no break from being injured. You are always injured and it is always difficult to move, to do anything, socialize, use the bathroom, just like basic amenities. So the mental battle is constant and you need to always be strong essentially. After the injury, it took about 2 weeks before I started therapy. And at first, it was very light, very, very highly motivated in the beginning because from all the research that I did, the more physical therapy you do earlier on and the harder you work will pay off towards the end of like your recovery when you would make the most gains. So I was very adamant about doing a lot of therapy early on. I would say it got to a certain point for about 3 or 4 months. I was doing therapy 5 to 6 days a week, a couple hours each day. Other than therapy though, there was no other treatment I received to directly benefit my condition other than the treatment with Verita. It got to a certain point where I believed I had an understanding of my condition and what life would look like with the symptoms that I had. And this includes the nerve pain, my level of function, what I like, the hobbies that I could and couldn't do. And when I arrived to this point, like, okay, this is what my life will look like, I asked myself a question: will I be able to accept this without trying something else? Or should I do anything within my power to try and get better, to get back to the same sense of life that I knew before the injury? And ultimately, it was the latter. I believe that even if this treatment didn't work out, at least I tried. I tried everything within my means to get better. And I think at that point, even if the treatment were to not work out, it would be easier to accept as opposed to not doing it in the first place. I had kind of a short list in my head of the problems I was hoping the treatment would help with. And one of them was the nerve pain. The second one was getting better control of bowel and bladder function. And the third one was sensory improvements on the lower half of my body. If I can get rid of one or two of those from the treatment, that would be like, I would be good with that. So in terms of the treatment, the only short-term effect that I would say I've noticed is that there was a decrease in the severity of my nerve pain. It was still present, but the degree to which it bothered me was significantly less. And everyone that I worked with was very friendly and very open with conversation too. They were very informative in terms of letting me know how muscles worked in certain ways. And they always brought a positive energy, even though they were experiencing like difficulties or they were feeling, even if they were feeling tired, you can tell that they went the extra mile to try and, still have that interaction with patients. I could tell that they all really like their job. They love working with the patients. So that's been one of the experiences that I've had. I believe one of the main purposes of life is to figure out who you are as a person. And, some people take many years to figure this out. Some people never do. Some people find that. And I believe that brings them a sense of happiness. The thing about the injury is that once you sustain something this life altering, it's almost like a restart. You need to start from scratch in terms of learning how to live, and also in reshaping your mindset in a way that you can accept with and be happy with, because you cannot lie to yourself about the condition. Because like I said previously, there is no break from it. So it takes a lot of self-work in order to be able to accept that. And I think that exploring new opportunities or ways, finding new hobbies is at least a good starting point in terms of trying to accept the injury and life now.